impairment means the impairment in hearing, whether permanent or fluctuating, that adversely affects a child's educational performance, but that is not included under the definition of deafness. According to Turnbull, hard of hearing is hearing loss of 20 to 70 decibels. Unlike a hearing impairment, the federal definition for deafness means a hearing impairment that is so severe that a child is impaired and unable to process linguistic information through hearing with or without amplification, and it adversely affects a child's educational performance. According to Turnbull, deafness hearing is a loss of 70 to 90 decibels. Looking at the history of deafness and hearing impairment in the United States, here are a few key milestones. In 1812, John Braidwood begins teaching a private class of deaf children at Bowling Hall in Cobbs, Virginia. Later in 1817, the first school in the U.S. for deaf students at the American Asylum for the Education of Deaf and Dumb opens. All instruction at this school is done in sign language. Then in 1950, the first transistor hearing aid appears on the market. This provides a way for hearing impaired people to increase their ability to hear. In 1958, Public Law 85905 provided funding for closed caption films for the deaf. Then in 1984, the FDA approved cochlear implants for the use in adults ages 18 and older. This was a great advancement for students with hearing impairments. In 1988, the Commission on Education for the Deaf recommended that Congress not recommend general education as the least restrictive environment. This had created a divide between those that believed in the hearing community or the hearing culture and those that felt that their students would be best served in the general education community. Here are some of the characteristics for students that are deaf and hard of hearing. First, deaf and hearing impaired students have the same cognitive ability as their hearing peers. Also, both hearing and deaf and hard of hearing students are born with the innate ability and desire to communicate. Students born with hearing loss develop delays in their language development. These delays range from mild to severe depending on the student's inability to process auditory information or their lack of exposure to visually encoded language. According to Luckner, Slyke, and Johnson, deaf and hard of hearing students enter school lacking sufficient domain and background knowledge. As students with hearing loss proceed through school, the cumulative effect of missed experience to gain general background knowledge begins to affect their reading comprehension. However, unlike reading and writing, deaf and hearing impaired students often achieve higher in mathematics. In addition to the academics, families and students with deaf and hearing impairments have issues to deal with. For instance, the decision needs to be made early on whether the student is going to communicate in sign language or whether they want to use spoken language. This has caused a great divide amongst the deaf community. When looking at the student population of deaf and hard of hearing students, they comprise about 1.2% of all students receiving special education services under IDEA. According to IDEA, deafness is defined as deafness or hearing impairment severe enough that a student is impaired in the processing linguistic information through hearing and the student's educational performance is adversely affected. However, there is no minimum decibel level defined in order for a student to receive special education services. In looking how the students receive services, the vast majority of students receive their education at public schools. Of those students, just over half participate in general education the full day. 8.3% of students receive it at a separate public school for students with disabilities, while 3.9% receive separate public education at a residential facility. Here are some best practices in order to serve the needs of students that are hearing impaired or deaf. First, create a language-rich environment by using captioning pictures around the classroom. Next, assess a student's prior knowledge before beginning a new topic. This will help create strategies to fill the gaps in a student's background knowledge. Also, closed caption technology is effective in assisting students with hearing loss build their general background knowledge and domain knowledge in a particular subject. When working with families that have children that are hard of hearing or deaf, here are some of the family perspectives that you may encounter. First, families have difficulty deciding on the appropriate services and support for their children, and they also need to deal with the reactions of their family and friends. Also, hearing parents need to choose between learning and using sign language, having the child use amplification for devices, or optimizing residual hearing and speaking directly to the child. For parents that are deaf and have children who are deaf or hard of hearing, they often need to choose between raising their child in a deaf community. They may choose to reject technology in order to enhance a child's hearing, and choose to use sign language only as a means of communication. For more information, here are several references that one can receive more information on how to best serve the needs of students that are deaf or hard of hearing. Thank you.